He learned early that poverty is loud. It speaks before you open your mouth. It sits on your clothes, clings to your shoes, stains your silence. Even when you say nothing, people hear it. They hear it in the hesitation of your steps, in the way you look down before meeting their eyes, in the apology hidden inside every sentence you speak. His name was Elias, and by the time he was 10 years old, the world had already decided who he was going to be. He lived in a one-room apartment above a closed grocery store, its windows permanently covered in dust and old flyers promising discounts that no longer existed. His mother worked 2 jobs and still came home exhausted and defeated, as if life had been draining her slowly, deliberately. His father had left years ago, not with drama, not with violence, but with indifference, which somehow hurt more. At school, Elias was invisible until invisibility turned into weakness, and weakness invited cruelty. The boys who bullied him never shouted. They didn't need to. They smiled. They whispered. They laughed just loudly enough for him to hear, but quietly enough that teachers ignored it. They took his lunch sometimes, not because they were hungry, but because watching him go without was entertaining. What hurt most was not the hunger. It was the certainty that no one would stop them. Elias learned something important before he learned algebra or history. The world does not punish cruelty. It rewards confidence. The bullies walked with their chests out. They joked with teachers. They acted like they belonged, and so the world treated them as if they did. Elias tried being kind. He tried being quiet. He tried being good. None of it worked. One afternoon, after school, he wandered into the public library, not because he loved books, but because it was warm and free and silent. He sat in the corner, pretending to read while waiting for time to pass. That was when he found the book. It wasn't placed prominently. It wasn't new or popular. It was old, with a cracked spine and yellowed pages, pushed halfway back on a shelf few people touched. The title meant nothing to him at first. He picked it up out of boredom, flipping through pages filled with dense paragraphs and sharp sentences. He almost put it back, but then a line caught his eye. Men are quicker to forget the death of a father than the loss of their inheritance. Elias didn't understand it fully, but he felt it. He sat down and kept reading. The words didn't comfort him. They didn't tell him that things would get better. They didn't promise fairness or justice. Instead, they did something far more dangerous. They explained the world as it was. The book spoke of power, of fear, of human nature stripped of illusions. It said people were selfish, opportunistic, loyal only when it benefited them. It said kindness without strength was an invitation to be used. It said morality was often a luxury of the powerful, not a rule of the universe. Elias felt something shift inside him. For the first time, his suffering wasn't dismissed or minimized. It was explained. He started coming to the library every day. He read slowly, carefully, returning to passages, copying sentences into a cheap notebook he carried everywhere. He didn't understand everything, but he didn't need to. The ideas seeped into him like poison and medicine at the same time. He stopped asking why people were cruel. Instead, he asked how they benefited from it. At school, nothing changed at first. The same boys mocked him, the same teachers overlooked him, but Elias was watching now. He noticed how the bullies only targeted those who reacted, how they avoided students who looked unafraid, even if they were smaller. He noticed how teachers favored students who spoke confidently, even when they were wrong. Power, he realized, was mostly performance. So he started practicing. He practiced silence, not the nervous kind, but the kind that made people uneasy. When someone insulted him, he stopped responding immediately. He let the words hang in the air. He stared just long enough to make the moment uncomfortable. The first time he did it, the bully laughed awkwardly and walked away. It wasn't a victory, but it was something. Elias stopped explaining himself. He stopped apologizing. He stopped trying to be liked. Instead, he focused on being unreadable. At home, his mother didn't notice the change at first. She was too tired, too busy surviving. But she did notice that he spoke less, that his eyes seemed sharper, more distant. Sometimes she worried, but she didn't ask. In their world, silence was safer than questions. Years passed. By the time Elias entered high school, he was still poor, still overlooked, but no longer weak in the same way. He learned that fear didn't always come from strength. Sometimes it came from unpredictability. He became known as the quiet one, not the shy one, not the weird one, just quiet. People talked around him, not to him. And that was fine. He learned more listening than speaking. He noticed who wanted attention, who needed validation, who lied easily, who flinched when confronted. Human behavior became patterns to him, predictable and repetitive. The book had warned him, people reveal themselves when they think no one is watching. Elias watched. One day, during a group project, a popular student took credit for work Elias had done. The teacher praised the student, the class nodded along. Old Elias would have felt rage, or humiliation, or despair. New Elias felt something else: clarity. He didn't confront the student, he didn't complain to the teacher, instead he waited. Weeks later, when that same student needed help before a major exam, Elias agreed to tutor him. He helped just enough to seem generous, not enough to make him independent. Dependence, he learned, was a form of power. When the exam came, Elias stayed silent as the student panicked, realizing he hadn't learned enough. Elias passed, the other student didn't. The teacher's perception shifted subtly. Reputation, Elias understood, was not built by truth, but by outcomes. People began to treat him differently, not warmly, but cautiously. And caution was respect's darker cousin. He didn't become cruel, at least not openly. He didn't bully, he didn't dominate, he simply stopped sacrificing himself for the comfort of others. He learned to say no without explaining, to leave conversations early, to give people less than they expected. It unsettled them. Some tried to provoke him to see if he could still be pushed. He never reacted the way they wanted. Sometimes he smiled, sometimes he ignored them entirely, sometimes he agreed in a way that made them uncomfortable. He was learning the art of control without force. One evening, back at the library, Elias returned the book to the shelf and realized something that frightened him. He was no longer reading it for guidance. He was seeing it reflected everywhere. Teachers, students, administrators, even his own mother's employers. Everyone played games. Everyone negotiated power, whether they admitted it or not. The difference was that most people lied to themselves about it. Elias didn't. But power, once tasted, always demanded more. Toward the end of high school, an opportunity appeared. A scholarship application, competitive, limited, life-changing. Students scrambled for recommendations, polished essays filled with humility and dreams. Elias read the criteria carefully, not what it claimed to value, but what it actually rewarded: leadership, initiative, impact. He didn't have money, he didn't have connections, so he created perception. He volunteered publicly, not excessively, but visibly. He joined clubs briefly, made strategic contributions, then left before being replaceable. He spoke at events only when his words added weight, never filler. Teachers began to mention his name without being prompted. By the time the scholarship was awarded, no one was surprised that Elias received it. Except Elias himself. Not because he doubted his strategy, but because he felt the final illusion break. The world wasn't unfair. It was indifferent. And indifference could be mastered. The day he left for college, his mother hugged him tightly, pride and fear tangled in her arms. She told him to stay good, to stay humble, to remember where he came from. Elias nodded. He didn't correct her. Some truths were unnecessary. As the bus pulled away, he watched the city shrink into the distance. The poverty, the weakness, the version of himself the world had tried to carve into stone. He wasn't angry anymore. He wasn't bitter. He was prepared. And somewhere deep inside him, a quiet, dangerous thought took root. If understanding human nature made him untouchable here, what would happen when he entered a world where power truly mattered? College did not feel like freedom. It felt like a larger arena. Elias arrived with a single suitcase and a mind already sharpened by years of quiet observation. The campus was clean, wide, confident in a way his old neighborhood had never been. Buildings didn't apologize for taking space. Neither did the students walking between them. He watched them carefully. Most of them came from comfort. It showed in the way they spoke without measuring every word, in how they assumed they belonged. Confidence flowed through them effortlessly, inherited rather than earned. Elias understood something immediately. This place did not reward intelligence alone. It rewarded positioning. On the first day of orientation, students clustered together instinctively, gravitating toward familiarity. Elias stood at the edge, observing patterns. Who led conversations? Who laughed too loudly? Who mirrored others to gain acceptance? He waited. When he spoke, it was to ask a question that made people stop and think, not to show off, just enough to be noticed. It worked. A few students began to include him naturally. Elias accepted, but he never revealed too much. He listened. He cataloged personalities the way others memorized lecture notes. There was Marcus, loud, ambitious, always talking about startups and success. He wanted admiration more than achievement. There was Claire, sharp, politically aware, already maneuvering toward leadership roles. She spoke carefully, always leaving herself an exit. There was Daniel, brilliant but insecure, desperate for validation from professors. Elias saw their needs, and needs, he had learned, were leverage. He didn't manipulate immediately. That was the mistake amateurs made. He built trust first, offering help without urgency, advice without pressure. He became useful. Usefulness created value. Value created protection. Professors noticed him early, not because he dominated discussions, but because when he spoke, it added clarity. He referenced others' ideas respectfully, reinforcing alliances while appearing collaborative. When group projects formed, Elias didn't rush to lead. He let chaos happen first, let voices clash, let egos compete. Then, calmly, he suggested structure. People followed. Leadership, he realized, was often just the willingness to organize disorder. By the end of his first semester, Elias was no longer invisible. His name circulated in conversations he wasn't present for. That mattered more than popularity. But college also introduced him to something new: threats with intelligence. One of them was Julian. Julian was everything Elias was not: wealthy, charismatic, well-connected. Professors liked him, students admired him. He didn't need strategy because the world already bent toward him. At first, Julian treated Elias kindly, with polite distance, but kindness from the powerful often carried condescension beneath it. They crossed paths in a competitive leadership program. Limited spots, prestige attached. Only a few would be selected. Elias saw Julian's interest sharpen. This was no longer survival. This was competition. Julian used charm. He networked aggressively, name-dropping donors and alumni. He made sure people knew him. Elias did something different. He stayed quiet. Instead of promoting himself, he reinforced the program's goals publicly. He praised the institution's values. He asked administrators thoughtful questions that framed him as aligned, not ambitious. When interviews came, Julian talked about his vision. Elias talked about execution. The results were posted 2 weeks later. Elias was accepted. Julian was not. The reaction was subtle but telling. Julian smiled when he saw Elias, congratulated him, but something hardened behind his eyes. Elias understood the lesson instantly. A defeated enemy who smiles is still an enemy. From that moment, Julian began working quietly, not against Elias directly, but around him. Rumors appeared, small ones, harmless on the surface, that Elias was calculating, that he lacked warmth, that he was hard to read. None of it was false, but it was dangerous. Elias didn't confront Julian. He didn't deny anything publicly. Instead, he leaned into it. He became more controlled, more precise. He volunteered for difficult tasks others avoided. When mistakes happened, he took responsibility without drama. People trust those who absorb blame. Julian's rumors lost power when Elias's reliability became undeniable. Still, Elias felt something new growing inside him. Enjoyment. Not pleasure, not happiness. Satisfaction.
The satisfaction of influence. He noticed how a single comment from him could shift a discussion, how people waited for his reaction before committing to opinions, how professors sought his input on projects beyond coursework. He never demanded power. He made himself essential. By his second year, Elias held leadership positions in multiple organizations, not visible ones, strategic ones, treasurer, coordinator, advisor, roles that controlled information and resources rather than applause. He learned another Machiavellian truth. Visibility attracts enemies. Control attracts results. When funding decisions came up, Elias knew where money went. When conflicts arose, he mediated privately, shaping outcomes before meetings ever happened. People began to associate calm with authority. One evening, Claire confronted him. "You don't need positions," she said carefully, "yet you always end up deciding things." Elias smiled slightly. "Someone has to." She studied him for a long moment. "You're dangerous." He didn't deny it. Danger, he had learned, was relative. To those who sought chaos, order was dangerous. To those who thrived on manipulation, clarity was dangerous. Claire became an ally after that, not because she trusted him fully, but because she respected his intelligence. Respect was stronger than affection. Julian tried once last time. During a major project, he deliberately withheld information Elias needed, hoping to create failure. Elias noticed immediately. Instead of reacting, he adjusted. He rerouted resources. He restructured timelines. He documented everything. When the issue surfaced, Elias presented facts calmly. No accusations, no emotion. Julian was exposed without Elias ever naming him. The fallout was swift. Julian didn't fall dramatically. That would have been mercy. He simply faded. Opportunities stopped appearing. People stopped asking for his opinion. Social death, Elias realized, was more efficient than confrontation. By his final year, Elias had secured internships, recommendations, and future offers. His financial fear was gone. His power was no longer theoretical. But something else had changed. He had stopped questioning whether he was becoming what the book described. He was becoming it. Late one night, alone in his dorm, Elias opened the old notebook where he had once copied sentences from a library book. He read them slowly. About fear, about perception, about human nature. He closed the notebook and leaned back. The boy who had once been crushed by poverty and cruelty was gone. In his place stood someone untouchable, not because no one could hurt him, but because no one could reach him without his permission. And as graduation approached, Elias understood the final truth. College was not the test. It was training. The real world would be far less forgiving. And he was ready.
Graduation arrived without ceremony in Elias's mind. Caps were thrown, parents cried, promises were made loudly and forgotten quickly. Elias watched it all with a detached calm, already focused on what came next. The real world did not wait for applause. He entered a consulting firm known for its ruthless efficiency and polished ethics. The building was glass and steel, designed to intimidate without appearing hostile. Elias liked it immediately. Places that pretended to be kind were always the most dangerous. On his first day, he said little. New hires competed for attention, laughing too loudly, volunteering too eagerly. Elias observed. He noticed who interrupted others, who deferred, who pretended confidence, and who possessed it naturally. His manager, Victor, was a man who valued results but worshipped control. He spoke softly and expected obedience. Elias recognized the type instantly. He didn't challenge Victor. He supported him. When Victor made decisions, Elias executed them flawlessly. When Victor hesitated, Elias offered options without pushing. He framed solutions as extensions of Victor's ideas. Powerful people, Elias knew, hated being corrected. They loved being reinforced. Within months, Victor relied on him. Not publicly, that would expose vulnerability, but privately, Elias became indispensable.
Reports passed through him. Data was filtered through his analysis. Recommendations bore Victor's name, but Elias's fingerprints. Others noticed. Whispers began. Not hostile ones, curious ones. Elias was careful. He never celebrated success openly. He never complained. He left early sometimes, arrived early others. Unpredictability protected him. One coworker, Lena, tried to befriend him quickly. She asked personal questions, offered gossip, attempted intimacy of information. Elias gave her nothing useful. Information, he had learned, was a currency you never spent carelessly. Instead, he listened. Lena talked enough for both of them. She revealed alliances, insecurities, ambitions. Elias stored it all without judgment. When restructuring rumors began, fear spread through the office. Layoffs were coming. Everyone scrambled to prove their worth. Elias did nothing dramatic. He prepared. He compiled quiet reports demonstrating his impact, not self-praise, evidence, clean, undeniable. When the cuts came, Elias wasn't even discussed. Others were. After that, his status changed. People approached him differently, slower, more carefully. Even Victor began to hesitate around him. That was dangerous. Elias adjusted immediately, offering Victor credit publicly, reinforcing hierarchy. Power struggles had to be invisible until they were finished. But ambition doesn't sleep. A major client project placed Elias in direct competition with Marcus, a former college acquaintance who had landed in the same firm. Marcus was aggressive, loud, convinced success was about dominance. Marcus tried to undermine Elias by taking meetings without him, claiming ideas as his own. Elias let it happen. He allowed Marcus to overextend, to promise more than he could deliver. Elias quietly supported the client behind the scenes, ensuring results regardless of Marcus's claims. When the project review came, results mattered more than narratives. Marcus faltered. Elias didn't replace him. Victor did. Marcus didn't accuse. He couldn't. Nothing Elias had done was visible. That night, Elias sat alone in his apartment, lights off, city glowing beneath his window. He felt the familiar satisfaction again. But something else followed it. Emptiness. Not regret, not guilt. Distance. He had mastered the game, but mastery came with isolation. Relationships were calculations now. Trust was conditional. Vulnerability felt like weakness. The book had warned him. Power costs. Elias received an offer from a rival firm. Higher pay, greater authority, fewer constraints. Victor didn't try to stop him. He couldn't. The move elevated Elias quickly. He now managed people older than him, louder than him, hungrier than him. They tested him. He set boundaries immediately. Clear expectations, quiet consequences, no threats. Those who adapted thrived. Those who resisted disappeared. His reputation followed him, controlled, strategic, unshakable. Clients trusted him because he never promised what he couldn't deliver. Executives feared him because he saw through them. He didn't need to expose weaknesses. People revealed them themselves. Years passed. Elias accumulated influence, not just money. He advised leaders. He shaped decisions. His words redirected millions without raising his voice. He became untouchable. But one night, he received a call from his mother. Her voice was weaker. Time had not been kind to her. She asked if he was happy. Elias hesitated. Happiness had never been the goal. "I'm secure," he said finally. She smiled through the phone. "That's good." After the call, Elias sat in silence for a long time. He thought of the boy in the library, the cracked book, the hunger, the fear. He had escaped all of it, but escape came with transformation. He was no longer poor. He was no longer weak, but he was no longer innocent either. The world had not broken him. It had shaped him. And as Elias looked out at the city, he understood the final truth of Machiavelli's lessons. The goal was never to be loved. It was to never be at the mercy of those who weren't. Power settles quietly when it is complete. Elias did not announce his arrival at the top. There were no headlines, no dramatic victories. Influence gathered around him the way gravity gathers matter, slow, inevitable, invisible to those standing inside it. By his mid-30s, his name carried weight in rooms he had never entered. Decisions were delayed until his opinion was known. Deals were adjusted because someone mentioned that Elias might object. That was real authority, not presence, but anticipation. He worked fewer hours now, not because he cared less, but because systems ran themselves. He had designed them that way. People executed what they believed were their own decisions, guided subtly by structures Elias had put in place years earlier. He was careful never to humiliate, never to threaten openly. Fear that announced itself was unstable. The best fear felt like respect. Yet the higher he rose, the quieter his life became. His apartment was elegant but empty. Conversations were efficient, not intimate. Relationships ended before they could complicate him. People admired him. Few knew him. That was intentional. Loneliness, he told himself, was safer than dependence. Then the past reached for him. A journalist requested an interview, a profile piece about self-made power brokers. Elias declined politely. The journalist persisted, mentioning his childhood, the scholarship, the unlikely rise. Elias felt something tighten. Control depended on opacity. He arranged a brief meeting, neutral ground, minimal exposure. He answered questions carefully, offering a version of his story that sounded inspirational without revealing the truth. Hard work, discipline, opportunity. The journalist seemed satisfied. But the article, when published, did something unexpected. It named him, not as ruthless, not as manipulative, as brilliant. People he had never met began to seek him out. Invitations arrived, boards, foundations, political circles, power adjacent to power. Elias recognized the danger immediately. Visibility changes the rules. Still, he accepted selectively. Influence expanded when guided. At one event, he met a man who reminded him of Julian, polished, ambitious, hungry. The man spoke too confidently, probing Elias with veiled challenges. Elias smiled and listened. Later that night, Elias removed the man from consideration with a single phone call. No explanation, no confrontation. The man would never know. That was the difference now. Years earlier, Elias had reacted. Now he simply adjusted reality. One winter evening, Elias returned to his old neighborhood for the first time in decades. The grocery store below his childhood apartment was gone, replaced by something modern and forgettable. The building looked smaller than he remembered. He stood across the street, unnoticed. No one recognized him. He didn't expect them to. Power, he realized, did not require witnesses. He visited the library next. It had been renovated, brighter, louder. He found the shelf where the book had once been. The exact copy was gone. Good, he thought. Some things were not meant to be inherited. As he walked home, a young boy passed him, shoulders hunched, eyes down. Elias recognized the posture instantly. He almost stopped, almost said something. He didn't. Advice only mattered when it was discovered, not given. That night, Elias slept poorly. Dreams came, not of power, but of hunger, of silence, of watching others laugh while pretending not to hear. He woke before dawn. For the first time in years, he questioned something fundamental. Not whether his methods were right, but whether they were complete. He had mastered human nature, but at the cost of connection. He was untouchable, but also unreachable. The book had taught him how to survive the world. It had never taught him how to live in it. Weeks later, Elias made a decision no one saw coming. He stepped back. Not from power, but from its constant accumulation. He delegated more, refused certain invitations, declined roles that offered prestige without purpose. People speculated. Some assumed illness, others assumed strategy. They were partially right. Elias began funding scholarships quietly, not with speeches, not with branding, anonymous, focused. He designed the process carefully, ensuring recipients were chosen for resilience, not obedience. He did not want followers, he wanted equals. He mentored selectively, offering guidance only when asked, never imposing philosophy. He taught structure, not cynicism, awareness, not cruelty. He did not undo himself, he refined himself. Years later, Elias stood in a room filled with leaders who spoke carefully in his presence. He listened, nodded, guided the conversation subtly as always, but now when the meeting ended, he left without staying to dominate the aftermath. He went home. The city lights still burned beneath his window. The world still moved according to forces he understood deeply. Elias was still dangerous, still untouchable. But now he knew why. Not because he controlled others, but because he no longer needed to. And that, he realized, was the final lesson the book never wrote. True power is not the ability to crush, it is the freedom to choose when not to.